Hello, and in this video I'm going to share with you an incredibly powerful but very simple technique that you can use to deal with difficult people without them winding you up and ruining your day. In an ideal world we wouldn't have to deal with difficult people. We can maybe find a way of isolating, cutting ourselves off from those kind of people. But of course we live in the real world, and in the real world, in work situations, maybe in family situations, maybe in social situations, you're going to come across people who trigger you. They really set you off. When you see them, you feel your hackles rising. You feel tension. They really have an effect on you. Difficult people are not likely to change. Maybe they can if they're getting the right kind of therapy, but in your dealings with these people, you've got to accept they are not likely to change how they act. So the only thing you can actually control is your reaction to these people. Because when you can control your reaction, you're actually getting back some control in that relationship and not letting these people affect you in what they do. So this is an incredibly powerful technique. So in this video, I'm going to share with you about what this technique is, how it works, how you can put it into practice. So the technique I'm talking about is something called a pattern interrupt, and it's a technique from what's called NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming. And it's been around a long time, and there are different variations, and I've played with it a lot. So I want to share my view of how you can use a pattern interrupt, because it's incredibly powerful, and there are some other things you can actually play into it as well to make it even more powerful. But basically a pattern interrupt is about this. It is about, we as human beings go through a pattern of behavior. And it's basically a three-step pattern where we have a thought, which leads to an emotion, which leads to an action or a response. Put that into context. It may be you've gone to a social event. You see someone at that event who really you find it difficult to be around. So you see that person and you get the thought of that person, which is not a helpful thought. That then triggers your body into going into a certain state, an unhelpful state, maybe feeling tense, maybe feeling your body tensing up, feeling anxious, really having unhelpful chemicals maybe pumping through your body. You're starting to feel that emotion. And then of course you're preparing yourself to go into either fight, flight, or freeze mode, all of which are pretty unhelpful, pretty unpleasant sensations to be in. But that person, they're reminding you of something, causing that response in you. You can't make them go away, and they're probably going to behave how they would always behave, that person. So the only thing you can control is how you react and deal with that. And that's what a pattern interrupt is about. It is about stopping that escalation from seeing that person into that feeling and whatever action response that you might take because of that trigger that the person is giving to you. So really very simple. It's about changing that escalation. And a pattern interrupt is about doing this. And we have pattern interrupts all the time in our lives. If we're working away on our phone or on our laptop and the phone rings or WhatsApp message comes through, our pattern is getting interrupted. We get distracted from what we're doing. That's life, that happens, and it can be kind of annoying, and we have to get ourselves back on track. But this is about using a pattern interrupt deliberately to actually pull yourself away from an unhelpful pattern of thought and escalation of response to a trigger. Let me make this real by telling you an example of how I came across and mastered this technique. So I'd started in a new job a number of years ago. First day in the job, I'm in the office. I hadn't even worked out where the coffee machine is yet, and I get a phone call. And the phone rings, I don't know who it is, and this guy is on the other end of the phone, and let's call him Neil. I pick up the phone, say hello. Without any niceties, this guy starts ranting at me, and I mean like really ranting. Angry, red in the face, ranting. And I'm kind of like, what is going on? You know, who is this person? Turns out this was someone else in the organisation at a similar level to me, who'd had his nose put out of joint because apparently, unbeknown to me, some people in his team were going to be moved from his team into my team. I didn't know this. Didn't have a clue about it. Didn't know where the coffee machine was yet. But he was clearly really upset about it. Really upset about it. And he's shouting at me, being very aggressive, saying I've stolen his people. And then he tells me, and they don't work for you until next Monday, so you cannot talk to them until then, and slams the phone down on me. I'd gone in there, first day, being calm, being excited, wanting to look professional, and of course I'm pretty knocked off course by this year. Who is this person? What's going on? What have I walked into in this in this organisation. Anyway, it turns out this guy, Neil, was the office bully. Been there a long time, renowned for being a bully, lots of bad behaviour, and had got away with it for so long, he felt he was untouchable. This was a big power trip for him more than anything. Yes, he was annoyed with what was going on, but he wanted to come in and do the big I am, try and put me in my place. Of course, for me, I'm a pretty calm person, I'm a pretty reasonable person, but yeah, this did knock me off course for that amount of time before I managed to get myself back and composed and get back on. And of course, this was someone I had to work with, and he was an unreasonable man, very unreasonable man. And with unreasonable people, you can't reason with them. So our relationship did become very, 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 very difficult. Now, he wasn't going to change, so I had to work out what was it that I could do to change. So instead of being in that place where when I saw him in the office or when I got a phone call from him, what was happening was every time I saw him, every time I got that memory of that first morning in the office at this angry, red-faced man, big guy, shouting down the phone at me, every time I'd see him, every time I'd see that phone ringing, I've got that decision to make. When the phone's ringing and I'm doing that, do I answer this and face whatever he's going to throw at me, or do I ignore it and then I'm thinking about it, worrying about it? It's on my mind, distracting me, interrupting what I want to be doing for the rest of that day. So I needed to change the picture, because the picture I had was this picture of this big, angry, snarly man, bellowing, bullying, wanting to put everybody else out of their stride. So that was the picture I had in my mind. And I have a real problem with people like that. I cannot stand bullies, difficult people like that. My instinct is to actually want to go into conflict and deal with people like that, because it's a real problem for me. So I needed to change that picture, because tempting as it was to go into conflict with him, that's not helpful. I had a difficult enough job to do. I don't want to go there. So I needed to remain calm, and to do that I needed to change the picture. So here's Neil, big, smart, snarling, difficult man. So what I needed to do was use a pattern interrupt to change that picture. And the idea of a successful pattern interrupt is to make that alternative picture that you go to when you have this trigger, when you're around this person, such that it's really hard to hold that negative feeling, that feeling that's going to put you in the fight, flight, freeze mode. So the picture I decided to create for Neil was of him at home, dressed in nothing but his nappy, a giant size, man size, 6'3" size man's nappy, with a big pin in it, walking around the house with a feather duster, dusting, with his wife walking behind him, telling him off for having missed some cobwebs. So this was the picture I created. You might want to create your own picture for your own difficult person, but for me, and I can actually feel the difference now as I'm talking to you, because when I was talking about Neil before, when I was talking about him, I was actually feeling myself getting quite tense. It was bringing me back to that initial conversation. Now I'm talking about him with this nappy on, walking around, I'm smiling. I'm actually feeling lighter. I'm feeling that tension actually flowing out of me. Because it's very hard to be angry. It's very hard to get into that fight flight mode when you're laughing. These are pulling you in opposite direction. So that was the picture I created for him. And then what I needed to do was make that habitual, that every time I saw him, instead of having this big, snarly, angry man image, I had this big man dressed in a nappy, walking around powerless, kind of ridiculous and comical. So that was the alternative picture that I wanted to go to. So how do you make that work? So there are the standard way of making this work with a pattern interrupt is basically it is about practice. So the first step is to create that alternative picture, a ridiculous picture that you can't help but smile to, that's going to distract you, that's going to interrupt that escalation of thoughts. So you create that picture. The second step is then to kind of make that habitual. So you can practice that every time you would think about that person, you are creating this alternative picture. So every time the phone would ring and it's them, I've got this alternative picture that I force into my mind. You could actually, if it's on your phone or on an email, you could actually be careful, obviously, with doing this, but you could actually maybe put some kind of picture, some sort of photo on there. You see that, actually see a physical image. So in creating that alternative picture and just practicing it. So if you get some kind of communication from them, you force yourself to go to that alternative picture. Could be actually, you're just going to sit down 2 or 3 times a day and think about that person. And think about that person, just think about that image. Just think about that image. Think about that scary, difficult person in a ridiculous situation, and notice what happens. Maybe look in the mirror doing it. Notice what happens with your face. You'll probably find yourself smiling. You'll probably feel your body relaxing, any kind of stress just dropping out through you. It really, really is quite effective. So you can practice it alone, notice those changes, and just get used to associating that person with an image that's far, far more powerful and helpful. So doing that 2 or 3 times a day, doing it whenever you get any kind of communication with them, but also you can actually just do it outside of that as well. Think of that person, have that picture, have that picture. And then the second part that is often used to reinforce this is by having some kind of reminder, reinforcement. It's a bit like when you hear a song that you associate with a particular memory. You hear the song and it brings back the memory. Maybe a place you were or what you were doing or something it signifies. The song signifies something for you. So you can do a similar thing with this. So you have that picture. So I've got this picture of Neil dressed in his nappy, looking ridiculous, looking comical, looking powerless. You can't be annoyed, angry, or feeling anything you don't want to feel because you've got that picture. And then you can create some kind of physical touch to reinforce that and remind yourself of that. So for example, I'm picturing Neil walking around like that, and I would do something like this. So I've got that picture and I'm going to go give myself 3 taps there. And it's in a place that it's not usual to tap yourself, and so it gives me a bit of a reaction. So I'm thinking of that picture and I'm tap, tap, tap. And you can get into the habit of doing that, picturing that thing, tap, tap, tap. It doesn't have to be there. It could be here or there, but it's somewhere where it kind of just feels a bit unusual. You're not used to someone tapping you there. It's getting a kind of a reaction. And if you do that 4 or 5 times a day for a week, while you're picturing that alternative scenario of that person, you should be able to get to the point where you can actually just do that to bring you back that picture. So it takes a little bit of practice, but it's really, really very powerful. So try doing that, and next time that person that you see, go to that picture, do something like that you associate with the picture, creating that association, and see what happens. You are interrupting that escalation of unhelpful thoughts into unhelpful feelings and actions. And it's really, really incredibly powerful. And the other thing that you'll notice is that you are, by doing that, quite often you disarm bullies, difficult people, because part of the thing they thrive on is actually seeing the reaction, the negative reaction they get from people. They like it. It makes them feel good. It's almost like, they're almost addicted to that. So when they see that you don't actually react that same way to them, generally these people back off. Generally they don't behave the same way because they're not getting the reaction they want. They quite often stop doing it. So indirectly, by doing what you're doing, you will actually influence their behaviour towards you. Maybe they'll move on towards somebody else, but they're less likely to behave like that to you when they see they don't get the reaction from you. So that is a pattern interrupt. It takes a bit of practice, but it's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly simple. You can use it for lots of different situations. And there is also a way of making that even more powerful, which is combining it with hypnosis, a self-hypnosis. So I'm just going to show you briefly how I would do that. So self-hypnosis is about just being in a relaxed, receptive, altered state. So let me just show you how I would make that pattern interrupt even more powerful. So I would be sitting down on a chair, my hands on my lap, my feet on the floor, and I'm going to start thinking about Neil. I'm starting to think about Neil, and I'm thinking about that phone call, and I'm beginning to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take myself into a very simple state of self-hypnosis. So what that involves is I'm going to do something that's called the Spiegel eye roll, which involves me looking up like this, and I probably look a bit weird, I probably look like a zombie, but I'm looking up into the roof of my eyes, looking up as high as I can, and my eyes are really wanting to blink and flutter, and I'm taking myself into a state of hypnosis. It's taking me into an altered state, and as I'm doing that now, and I'm picturing Neil, I'm now changing that picture, and I'm picturing him, and I can just start to relax my eyes a little bit because that's maybe a bit too uncomfortable. But now I'm picturing that big angry man going home, changing into that nappy, walking around the house with that duster, being bullied himself. And I'm picturing that, and I'm feeling actually that tension dropping up my body. I'm finding myself smiling. And I'm picturing that now, and I'm just starting to do that tapping. And now I'm just picturing that. So I'm picturing Neil, and really I'm replacing that picture that I had before. It's being washed away. And I can just imagine that picture now just getting smaller. It's getting smaller. It's fading like an old photo of that angry, snarling man. And maybe it's going to be burnt, or maybe it's going to blow away, but it's just going to get into the distance, smaller and smaller. And now I'm just imagining that ridiculous picture. And then I'm just going to count myself back up, having forgot all about it on the count of 1 up to 5. So count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Open my eyes, and yeah, I'm feeling such a difference in me. And I don't know if you can see it there, but it's now I'm mentioning Neil, and I'm thinking about that ridiculous scene. So that is a pattern interrupt. I hope you've enjoyed it. As you can see, it's quite a powerful thing. It's something you can actually have a lot of fun with as well. So hope you've enjoyed it. Please do give me, if you like this, please give me a like. Please give me some comments. Please subscribe. It helps more people to see this video and other videos, that simple things that are helpful and could be accessed by as many people as really need this help. And there's a lot of us who need help out there right now.